All right. Again. Okay, let's try it. Hey, what's up, Corey? Try to request me again. I tried to request you, and for some reason it didn't bite. I guess you didn't see it, but let me try to request you. Man, Instagram, why are you doing this to us?
Yeah,
Hey,
heck yeah.
hey,
That's what I'm talking about.
yeah. Like I said, second time's the charm.
Yeah, Instagram be tripping, man. And before, like on my last few interviews, like
Mhm.
I was just glad that it didn't do that, but it just had to start acting up, man. Like, because I had problems before, and I'm like, I know I updated my app and all that, so it's
Right.
just like IG just be tripping, man, just be trolling it, trolling its own site. Man, how are you doing, bro?
So this is actually my first time ever doing anything on Instagram Live. Uh,
Oh,
but yeah, uh, things have been cool. I've been trying to juggle, practicing drums and also trying to get band rehearsals in, and then also having a job for the first time in like 12 months. So it's been a crazy year, but it's been real good for me.
heavy, man. Well, can I introduce you? And if I get anything wrong, like, just correct me.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
you guys, for this Black History of Rock and Roll month, third episode, we got our extravagant Corey. The brother
Yeah.
is a drummer. He's also a vlogger, and he plays with the band, The Breathing Light, with the homie Kyle Ozero, who we should also get on here pretty soon.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
definitely.
you're in another band too, yeah? Or is that the only one?
Uh, Not currently.
Okay.
But I'm open to it. I do so my beginnings actually starts out like as a podcaster, although
Mm.
I haven't done any of that in like 4 years. I used to do this podcast called Metal for Brains,
Oh, wow.
which was back started in 2013, and it was about the experience of being black in rock and metal. And it was me, um, my friend Paul, who is out in Detroit, and then my friend Brian, who at the time lived in New York. And Brian was like I think he was like a comments moderator for like Metal Sucks or one of those blog sites.
Yeah.
So he had a lot of like old school knowledge and stuff, and that was around the time where I started actually listening to more heavy music. Um, but I've always wanted to drum, uh, and I would say I've only really been playing actively for like 4 or 5 years or so.
Wow.
But my dad was a drummer. My dad, my dad was a jazz trained drummer, but he was really into like Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that growing
Yeah.
up. And so he played in a bunch of bands that like played of all different genres, R&B, country, funk, that type of stuff, all on the south side of Chicago in the 70s. So he has crazy stories.
Man, what was the name of this band? And I know that there was one, correct me if I'm wrong. I featured a brother by the name of Al Lathan from a band called Aura. I think they were from Chicago back
Hmm.
in the 70s. Very eclectic rock band too. I
Hmm.
wonder if like your dad's connected with that band at all.
He could have been. I don't know. My dad, I never asked him. Hey Sid, how's it going?
What's
That's
up,
Sidette,
Sid?
that's my friend. She's amazing. But yeah, no, I've never actually asked my dad if the band had a name. I think they were just like they would do any type of gig. It was just like a touring house band, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
They
So
had
who? So
no,
how
go
did
ahead.
you get?
Yeah.
how did you get into drumming, man? Like, how did you like? First of all, even before that, like, and I assume your dad, but I just want to hear your story. How did you just get into music? And for the music that you dig, like
Hmm.
what was the thing that really got you digging that stuff? Like when your first introduction to that?
Yeah, so my dad named me after Corey Glover.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was born in March 92.
Wow.
Which uh to anyone who is of the older generation, to me, it makes them feel crazy that I am old. I feel old, and it feels crazy to me that there's a generation that is like, yeah, 32-year old. And I'm like, I kind of agree. But
No, I remember '92. I just turned 50, and that was a good year for music,
oh,
man. You
oh,
know?
hell yeah. No, Bad Motor. No, that was 91. I think Dirt and Stain came out that year in 92 though. But yeah, 92 was a great year. But as far as like my introduction to the type of music that I listen to, this may sound funny, um, but my dad bought me a VHS tape of the Green Jelly Three Little Pigs claymation music video.
That's so funny. Oh, I have to interject on that because we just interviewed a brother that played in Green Jelly, Dave
Oh,
Pranscombe.
oh
Hopefully
shit,
he'll come back.
that's
Yeah, he was
dope.
on here earlier when we were trying to get you on, but
Hmm.
Instagram was tripping.
Hmm.
Dave, please come back. But yeah,
Yeah,
he played in that band. That's funny that you mentioned them too.
that's crazy because yeah, like Danny Carey was the drummer for the studio or stuff at the very least, or and that was before Tool blew up, I guess. And I listened to mainly like hip hop and stuff all the way up until like teenage years, like, and it was like that was when video games really started to mold my music tastes. Um, it was like the Tony Hawk soundtracks, NBA 2 sound, NBA 2K soundtracks weren't complete garbage like they are now. At the time, and then also I really got really into Guitar Hero, and so that's how I got into a lot of my favorite bands. I mean, like I've heard a lot of like what is now my favorite music in passing by switching from BET to MTV after school. So like my favorite band is, or I have a three favorite bands. They're Queens of the Stone Age, Faith No More. No, well, it's Queens of the Stone Age, Soundgarden, and Opeth. I mean, I Faith No More would make a top five, but and I've heard like No One Knows in passing by Queens of the Stone Age, but it wasn't really until I got into the Rock Band video games and I primarily played the drums on those.
Mm.
And that kind of like taught me how to play drums, even though my dad gave me like basic lessons because, he still had a drum kit when I was a kid.
Wow, that's pretty dope, man. And yeah, I noticed that you were talking about your Nick and hi Ronan, what's up, man? Ronan is an awesome drummer himself, man. He's a
Mhm.
killer. And his wife actually does culture rock griot. Check her out. And
Oh,
they're
shit.
all
Nice.
musicians, and their kids are they're all band, and they're really good, man.
Hmm.
Um, I noticed that you put we were talking about like your name Birdman for two reasons because of the rapper and also that you're a Mike Patton fan and he does a lot of some really crazy vocals.
Yeah,
I've seen Mr. Bungle. That's actually my favorite project from him. And I
I
like Faith
got to
No More
see
too.
Mr. Bungle last
Oh
year, and it
man.
felt like my life was complete. Even 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 though they're doing like the thrash metal stuff now, rather than like,
Yeah, I saw them when they did the California tour. So
yeah,
they did the Disco
oh,
Volante and the
nice,
lounge stuff. But
nice.
but man, if you saw the thrash stuff, that's awesome. I think it's Trace Bruans. I think he might be playing with him on that. I talk
Yeah,
to Trace sometimes.
yeah,
That's
no.
so
So
cool.
the only members who are in the current version of Bungle that was in that is Mike, Trey, and Trevor Dunn. Trevor Dunn, who is an amazing bassist, and
Yeah.
he mostly plays like jazz gigs outside of outside of Bungle, and whenever Mike Patton needs him for some obtuse bullshit, I say bullshit lovingly because I love Fantomas and all that shit.
Yeah, Phantom
But yeah,
Mouse is
but yeah,
hey.
no, yeah, I've earned the nickname Birdman twice in my life. The first the first time was because I was a huge fan of Dipset. I was a huge fan of Cameron and Joel Santana in middle school, and called me Birdman because Dipset was known as the Bird Gang. Uh, and it's funny enough, like we had a security guard who was like the personal bodyguard for Kanye West early in his career.
Crazy.
And he had tried to talk me out of liking Cameron because he was like, no, they're all those rappers, they're lying except for him. And I'm like, you just made me like him even more.
Did you see
But
that
then,
video that FD Signifier did on Cameron?
oh, I've not. I didn't know he did
Dude, you
one.
gotta
Okay.
watch that video.
Okay.
It's a trip, man. I'm not gonna say anything else about it. Watch
Okay.
that video. I know FD makes long, like his stuff goes for hours at times, but it's a
Oh
good video.
yeah. He makes really well researched stuff and he has a really good perspective. He's also from Chicago.
That's crazy.
And yeah, Cam is crazy. Like going on Bill O'Reilly and going like you mad. Like, just one of the
He
most
told him that.
iconic moments in television ever.
I wish I could have saw that because I could not stand Bill O'Reilly at all. I don't like that dude.
Oh,
Man, I wish I could have
it's
saw that.
it's still on YouTube. Bill O'Reilly invited him and Dame Dash to defend hip hop lyrics.
Wow.
And it just devolved into like them trolling Bill O'Reilly live on
It's
TV.
good because he needs to be trolled. I know he was getting all hot and bothered. He's always angry at something for no reason.
He
Such a bigot,
struggled.
that guy.
He struggled.
I gotta look that up just for giggles, man. I
Yeah.
gotta look that up.
But yeah, the second time I got the nickname, it was because yeah, Mike Python has those whistle screens, and I started like you know the concept of stimming and all that stuff, and I like kind of trained myself how to do that with like false chords, and then also with just the whistle. And where I worked at the time, there would be like squeaky doors, and so I would like play jokes on security guards and do it in the way that the doors would squeak, just to see if they thought the door was opening. Like I don't know if Instagram is gonna block it out, but it'd be like I don't know if the mic picks it up. So some mics or microphone stuff filters it out, but like uh yeah, it, it was funny.
Man, the closest I've ever come to that, I've you know done scare acting, and I always imitate like women screaming, and it's even more freaked out when they see me do it. They're all stop!
Uh-huh.
Oh no, don't! I'm like, ah! I can't do it now because I usually have to do it for like a few minutes to really get it
hmm
up there,
hmm
and it freaks people out. And I think that's fun. I'm laughing
No,
even like I'm just cracking up, man. Just the reaction of that. So when I heard you do that, I'm like, awesome, man.
yeah.
That's so cool.
No, that's a part of what makes it funny is the fact that it also is kind of uncomfortable because it's coming from something
From
that
a
you wouldn't
dude.
expect it coming from. Like that's kind of why what's drawn me to like death metal and
Yeah.
metalcore and hardcore in general is there's a way to be able to do stuff like that and have a sense of humor about it, but still be serious. It's like you can't listen to the Dillinger Escape Plan and like not laugh at how ridiculous some of that shit is.
I dig that stuff, man. And I like the fact they call it mathcore, whatever.
hmm
But what they did, like, was just, I mean, I'm an old school prog rock head. I also love death metal and grindcore and all
hmm
that stuff, too. I mean, I'm wearing my
I'm
Disturbulence t shirt,
I'm wearing a
Oh,
King Crimson shirt. Yeah.
yeah! Dude! That's like one of my favorite bands, especially Red Era King Crimson. But I
Yeah,
love that particular album a lot.
yeah,
Of their '80s stuff, that's my favorite album of their '80s stuff.
there,
Discipline, man. I'm
yeah,
sorry, I didn't even get up. Like I did a lap around the.
yeah. No, the moment you said prog rock, I was like, oh, word.
Yeah, heck
Okay,
yeah, bro.
yeah,
Like, I'm a huge King Crimson fan, man. Like, dude, man.
yeah. Like, and especially '80s Crimson, but also like the '90s live recordings of the '80s stuff
Man,
is crazy. Bill Bruford is one of my favorite drummers ever. Like,
yeah. Same
I
here.
I I have like it's weird because again like I joined the Breathing Light this year and it's weird to say that and because you know they've had a lot of drummers. Our bassist is the drummer that I am quote unquote replacing. His name's DJ, and DJ's dope. And it's been interesting to try and find my place as someone who like kind of like deliberately likes to find ways to fit in ways that doesn't fit in.
I can understand that.
And that's like a lot of my music taste is like stuff that is unique in spaces where it's really hard to be
Mm,
unique. You know, like there's no death metal or progressive metal band that sounds like Opeth.
mm.
There's no prog rock that band that sounds like King Crimson because
Nope.
King Crimson fully embraced their jazz influences,
Oh yeah.
whereas Yes was like, let's be a bit more classical about it.
But
Um,
it's funny, even with Yes, I mean, maybe
mhm.
because of Bruford,
Yeah,
they couldn't get away from the jazz
yeah,
thing. Like, I mean, man. And I love early Yes. I like all the Yes albums with
hmm
Bruford and Squire. That's my rhythm section.
yeah,
After that, I'm like, ah.
yeah. No, same
I'm sorry,
exactly.
I didn't even interrupt. Oh my gosh.
No,
I'm like
no,
nerding out.
no, that's the dude, same. Like you know, Fragile and Close to the Edge
Yeah.
is my favorite and like and again like more recent bands. I say recent when shit that was like 20 years ago, but the Mars Volta. The Mars
Oh yeah, my friend Ike was in that band.
huh?
Yeah.
Sorry,
My
say
friend
that?
Ike played with Mars Volta. Ike Owens. Rest in
Wow, you were
peace.
friends with my oh
Yeah.
wow, yeah,
We're
rest
from
in
the
peace. He was
same city.
amazing.
He was a
Yeah.
great friend of mine, actually.
hmm
Yeah. Man, wow, thank you for even mentioning them because of him. You know,
Yeah.
he was the homie.
Yeah, no, dude, we could talk about bands all day. Like that is my jam because like the Mars Volta at its peak is like right before it kind of like fell apart, which is like my favorite album of theirs is Amputecture, which is
Mm,
like most people's least favorite albums of their first four albums. But to me, Amputecture is also their album where they like combine King Crimson and Celia Cruz,
that's
and
dope.
it's dope. That like just the idea of it, saying it that way, is just so good. And Ike's, I think Ike was still their keyboard. I think he was their keyboard for like the duration up until he passed. Wasn't he? I can't remember.
I
They
know
had
he was
so many
on
lineup changes.
Records, and he was on a few other albums. And you know, I know, and yeah, Ike. I mean, between Jack White and them, and he did a
hmm
lot of other stuff too, like lots.
Yeah,
And plus, his band Free Moral Agents, who I
right.
featured. You know, yeah, man, he did a lot. Rest in peace to that brother. He was a real down dude. Like I miss that guy, man.
Yeah.
Seriously,
The, he
you
he
know,
seemed he seemed like a really chill, likable guy,
he,
and he was
he
just
was.
also just fucking talented. Like, how do you stand out as a keyboardist in a band that has John Theodore in
Yeah,
it?
he definitely, or Thomas Pridgen, all those guys are
Yeah,
like just amazing, you know. Like, but Ike was like literally, if you see him on the street, he's saying, "What's up, man?" No rock star attitude or anything like that. What's up,
hmm
Sketch? That's the homie. Sketch
yeah.
did my
No,
very first Black History of Rock and Roll interview,
Yeah.
man. That's the
Ske
homie, man, John, man. And
yeah,
you've heard his
John's
band,
my
Jenny
friend
Hates
too.
Techno.
Yeah. No,
That's the homie, man.
I've been like, I mean, it's kind of weird because Sketch did a podcast series called Sketchy Conversations.
Yeah,
So this is like my third time being interviewed for anything ever.
that's
Um,
rad.
and the first time was because of Metal for Brains, and I was trying to promote it, and I was bad at promoting it, but whatever. And then the second time, it was just me and Sketch just looking for an excuse to shoot the shit. And I think like we talked for 3 hours and had to cut 2 hours of it out.
Hey, did Sketch do any of his impressions for you? And no, I did not know that, John. I didn't know that he was on the Afropunk board. That's pretty cool. Did he do any of his impressions? I have to hear because he interviewed me. He did the impressions and had me dying laughing, dude. Like you
I
should
know,
always keep more.
like I know he does a lot of impressions. Like his Jim Cornette is fucking amazing. Because
Oh man,
both him and I are wrestling fans. Yeah.
yeah, that brother is talented in so many ways,
hmm
man. Yeah, we talking about you, Mr. Ellison.
Yeah, and it's crazy to, see Jenny Jenny Hates take techno get a bunch of like coverage now after like finally after all these years playing Afropunk.
Good. That's
Um
really
and
good.
and you know not being owed money by Mr. Morgan. But um allegedly allegedly.
Man. Man. You see his comment?
Yeah, yeah.
Heavy, man. Real heavy, man.
Shout out to Essence Fest.
Man, what? Oh, I didn't know what's Essence Fest.
The people who own Afropunk
Oh,
now.
I didn't know that, man. Hey,
Yeah,
shout to James Spooner who started it, and people keep trying to disassociate him from that, man.
yeah,
James
absolutely.
and James has been still putting in work, man, with like him going across. I mean, the art and the books that he's been putting
Yeah,
out. I saw him at a Velt show recently, man. Still doing his thing, and I'm so happy and proud of him. And he's the reason that I even met Sketch and like a bunch of other cats that I met through him was through those old message boards. You know, like
yeah.
that's to me, Afropunk's gonna always be there. I miss not being able to see like DeFay and all the older festival stuff, but you know what? We're still keeping it alive in our other ways. Like he said, we got to do our own thing, whether it's Afropunk and or other things too.
hmm
You know, like other people, we're doing our things, man. So
Yeah,
yeah, I didn't know Essence owned that. That's a trip.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I found out about Afropunk, too, quote unquote, too late. Like, but by then I had already met Sketch online. Like, we were originally like friends on Twitter. Uh, and I met a lot of the people that way. And actually, Kyle and I were talking about it that last night. Kyle Zero, who's the leader for the band that I'm in.
Yeah, the
Uh,
homie.
Sketch saying Black Rock festivals are going into the territory era. Yeah,
What's the
yeah.
territory? I'm older, right? You guys. What's the
Okay.
territory era?
So there's this era of professional wrestling where it was all regional territories,
Damn.
where the AWA had the Midwest, WWF had the New York, Jim Crockett had the South, and then there was the Von Erichs had Texas and all that stuff. That's what he's referencing. But
That's heavy, man.
it makes sense. It makes sense. Like, Leg Drop is really picking up on in New York. Shout out to Leg Drop Productions. Uh, and uh, so here's the thing. Like, uh, Kyle and I were talking about this, but it was like I always felt like I was on the outside looking in, and I feel that way about like all of my different interests. I'm on the periphery of different communities. I never really felt like, or I never really actively chose to engage. And so when starting to take drums more seriously, it's like, okay, I know specific people, but there's all these people that I don't know. And Kyle was like going crazy over that because it was like, yeah, I know specific people, but he was talking about how it was on the Afropunk board where he was like, yeah, it was like me and this other person, we were like the kids on the board. And
He was a
yeah,
kid.
yeah,
Crazy.
yeah, it was crazy. So I'm catching up. I mean, like and I met a lot of people when I did Metal for Brains, even though like through the 7 years that we did it, we probably did like 14, 15 episodes. I got to meet really cool people through that. I don't know if you know Alicia Warrington. Uh, she's Alicia Taylor in WWE currently.
Huh.
She's a ring announcer.
Wow.
She was the drummer for Kelly Osbourne and
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Kate Nash. Yeah.
Wow.
And I met her through that. I met Militia from Judas Priestess through that.
Shouts to
Um,
Militia. We had her on
yeah,
here too. That lady is awesome.
yeah.
She's
And,
all
and
kinds of awesome.
shout out to all of them. And like, it's funny. Um, the first interview I had on this podcast that was about the black experience of being in rock and metal was actually a white guy. Uh, it was Scott Reeder, who's the bassist for Caius.
Oh
Uh,
wow. I'm
yeah,
surprised you
and
didn't get Bjorn Brant Bjorn. He was in Caius.
uh,
He's black. A lot of people don't know that, but
I thought he was Mexican. Okay.
no, he's
Uh,
he's black.
okay.
He's
Yeah, I
half.
didn't know
That's
that.
what I know.
Yeah, no, so like that was also during like right during the end of this lawsuit that happened
Oops.
where yeah, Josh and Scott sued Brant and John Garcia. Uh, so there was this whole thing about Caius Lives, which was a Caius reunion, but without Josh Homme in it. Uh,
Oh.
but yeah,
So
no,
that's
Scott. The only
why
re
they.
the only re we the only reason why that ended up that way was because he was the first person to actually like respond. He was he was a really nice dude. And he was like talking to me while he was like tending to his farm because
Oh
he's
wow.
like a farm guy
That's
and
cool though.
he plays bass shoeless and like and like Caius is a crazy band because like they'll be playing like this hyper machismo psychedelic stoner rock, and then in the middle of it, the rhythm section will turn into like this funk thing where it's like Brant and Scott Reeder just going off into like this whole funk sound in the middle of all this atmospheric stuff. And
That's
yeah,
cool.
no, yeah.
Man, yeah, that's real cool. Yeah, I noticed you were doing some Queen of Stone Age drum stuff, and I'm like,
Mhm.
man, this guy is on one, man. Like you're killing it. Who are your influences, if you don't mind me asking, drum wise?
Yeah, so drum wise, I steal a lot from Mitch Mitchell, who's Jimi
Yes.
Hendrix's guitarist, Matt Cameron from Soundgarden, John Theodore, who's been in tons of stuff, and he's the current drummer for Queens of Stone Age, but he was in the first three Mars Volta records. He was in Golden. He was in One Day as a Lion with Zach De La Roca.
Yeah, my friend Joey
Um,
was in that band. Joey Karam.
oh shit,
Yeah,
that's
from the Locusts.
oh he played the keyboards on that. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah
crazy.
that project. I'm so mad that it's just an EP and like I've got some bootlegs because they played like two songs that weren't on the EP and I'm like I wish they did more with that.
That's insane. Yeah, that's the only time I ever heard it. I'm like, wait, I know who that band is because
Hmm.
I remember him like being in that band. So I still have to check them out. I have not heard it yet,
Oh
you
yeah,
know, and I just remember, you know, he was a part of that.
yeah.
But
No,
that's crazy.
John Theodore like really just is like the epitome of just playing powerhouse stuff. Like he was playing the Cobham type stuff that Bonham was trying to
Wow.
play on that record. Like, and so yeah, my dad, my dad was into a lot of funk music, and not just funk music, but rock music too. So I always heard like Zappa, Funkadelic, Tower of
Heck yeah.
Power. My grandma loved James Brown, so I always heard James Brown. And I'm starting to find out that like actually Sketch pointed this out. I had covered this Silver Sun pickup song and he was watching me play and he was like, that's kind of a James Brown beat. And I was like, fuck, that is kind of like a boogaloo.
It's
But
sick.
it's like in the context of like shoegaze, dream pop type stuff. But that's why I say the word like I steal from like music is just everyone stealing from each other, but just like providing their own context.
Mm.
Um, and like that's another thing I can talk about all day is like the philosophy of music and stuff because like I'm a writer too. I'm the type of drummer who gets fired because they came in and they're like, hey, I have a song that I wrote.
Because you're an innovator. That's why, man. And that's pretty cool. Like the fact that like, I mean, I also play drums along with playing
Mhm.
bass, and all those 60s and 70s drummers have had a huge influence on me. So it's amazing. Even like when you mentioned Bruford or Cobham, for me, a lot of those drummers made me want to even look at what came before them, which is the
Yeah,
jazz and also the blues and even classical stuff. And the stuff that these guys did, like that point between the late 60s and early 70s was like a crazy high point of just experimental stuff, especially in rock and roll. But yeah, we could say for jazz and R&B too. Like the way
yeah,
these guys are playing, it's like how? Like even now, it's just like even death metal guys are going back to like playing some of the things that influenced those drummers. You know,
right.
like it's crazy. You know,
Like,
you listen to the Origin and they're doing shuffling and crazy marching like jazz type stuff. You know, like
yeah, like, so e- even when I say like I'm really influenced by Mitch Mitchell, I say that knowing that like a lot of what he was doing was the stuff that Elvin Jones was doing.
yep,
And you know, and then like if you start going into like the jazz spaces, then it's like Omar Hakim and stuff like that. I fucking love the stuff Omar Hakim did with Sting in
yeah,
the
I
90s.
forgot about that.
That shit's crazy. And like so like yeah, I'm a drum nerd, but I'm also like a music nerd. Like yeah, so sometimes that can get me in trouble is just because like I I know the origin of a lot of things, and so when people point out things and they're like, this is the person that we want, or like also I can be like a bit anal when it comes to like when people say the first of anything. Like when people refer to Death as the first black punk band or the first punk band. Uh I think like that shit, what they made is crazy. And it feels like just painting them as that is actually does like a discredit to the shit that they were doing. Because they were taking like uh, what was going on with the MC5 and Iggy Pop, and also combining like funk into it. And then like also super heavy political lyrics and stuff. And, and but like it's still like proto punk to me,
I'm
But
glad that you brought that up because I had a
yeah,
question based off of some things that like I was watching some of your vlogs, and I think
uh-huh,
this was actually the first one that I saw.
hmm,
when we're talking about Black history of rock and roll invention and innovation, when
Hmm.
it comes to people saying that certain things were the first. Now, granted,
Hmm.
I understand like definitely where you're coming from on that, and I
Hmm.
understand why. I'm sure that you've probably got a lot of backlash, and even just as a sidestep.
It's funny. I don't get backlash. I am a very non-important person.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just saying, like, I understand where you're coming from, but I was going to
Yeah.
say, even in regards to death, in the Stooges and the MC5, those guys are all influenced by the same thing. They love James
Yeah.
Brown, they love Sun Ra, they love John Lee Hooker, who had
They're
a
all
huge
from
influence on the
Detroit.
whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all from Detroit, and that death to me was just kind of doing the same thing, even though they started off as more of like a funkier rock band. But the Stooge had some funkier moments too. They're
Yeah.
like trying to do that. James Brown meets like the Doors, meets like John Lee Hooker, and like just avant-garde, like crazy stuff too, because
Hmm.
all the free jazz influence, and they were just doing their little amateur version of that.
Hmm.
So for me, I look at it all like I'm not saying that Death was the first. I mean, if you want to get technical, a band that was really active back then and people knew who they were, even in '74, was Pure
Yeah.
Hell, and they still don't get enough credit.
Yeah.
Death definitely was ahead of their time in that sense, but they were definitely on some garage rock band stuff, which punk we can say comes from.
Yeah.
But Pure Hell, in essence, they were like what the New York Dolls was when it's like, and they knew those guys, like glam going into punk. They were a
Hmm.
part of that whole movement. Like those guys literally like were a part of that early wave going into punk that influenced a lot of those punk bands, you know. But
Right.
I understand what you mean by that because I'm gonna let you
'Cause yeah, yeah,
um
you get
elaborate on that.
you get into a slippery slope when you start talking about who's the first to do it. Because like also a lot of punk rock is just like Chuck Berry with
Jump
distortion.
Blue. Yep.
Yeah, and so then it's like, okay, then who's the first? Who's really the first punk? Was it Screamin' Jay Hawkins? Was it, Sister Rosetta Tharpe? How far are we taking it? Like, when people talk about, I, 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 I like love context, which is a very autistic sentence, I understand. But like when people talk about Tina Bell and they force her legacy to be she invented grunge, which is not necessarily the truth because grunge is like a strange label because none of those bands sounded alike. And it's like the context of what she meant to that group as a culture like means so much better in context, so much so that like saying it like that does her a disservice because when she was in Bam Bam, Matt Cameron was her drummer.
Yeah.
Kurt Cobain was her roadie, but also there's bands in that scene that predate Bam Bam. And and you can talk about what that band is from from the context of well, Soundgarden got their drummer after Chris Cornell. Chris Cornell was originally the drummer for Soundgarden,
Hmm.
and they recruited Matt Cameron from Bam Bam because Chris Cornell Chris Cornell wanted them to get a different singer, which is crazy to think of a universe where Chris Cornell doesn't sing,
Hmm.
and is the drummer for Soundgarden. Um, and because he originally he did like a Karen Carpenter thing, he drum and sang at the same time, and it's like talking about the band within context of like, oh, this is where Matt Cameron got his start. This is where Kurt Cobain got his start. This is where and also them as a band sounding the way that they did, were they were fucking awesome. She was an amazing singer. It's weird to like kind of like neatly package it because you can't neatly package history into like a nice little bow and be like this is the first of anything because genres are made up grunge isn't a genre. Screaming Trees and Pearl Jam don't sound like Alice in Chains and Mudhoney. Um, so genres are just something that they put on a shelf so you know where to find a record at a record store,
Hmm.
which one would say is kind of obsolete at this point.
I think sometimes, like especially when it comes to us playing rock and roll, and
Hmm.
I know that you know a lot about like our history within that, just based off of some of the things I've heard you talk about. I think that like a lot of it, we kind of go obscure in a lot of ways, and sometimes you know I could understand what you mentioned something about even our own support of it, which I think
Hmm.
should have been going on in spite of the record industry stuff. I understand why Tina Bell's importance is what it is.
Yeah.
Like she was definitely amazing. And as you said, grunge is more of like a genre thing. But when it comes to when I heard Bam Bam, I just think of him as like a very innovative post-punk alternative. And that's a lot of those bands were pretty much post-punk, and
Hmm.
they just kind of like I mean the 90s comes along, and
They were
they put
they were like
either post-punk or
post punk Betty Davis.
yeah, I mean, I understand why you're saying that, but I
Uh
still think of her in
huh.
her own kind of thing because she
Yeah.
did a lot. I mean, yeah, we could say Betty Davis meets Nina Hagen or something like that, but at
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
time, like, I don't even want to go there because she kind of carved her own thing going on. She
Yeah.
definitely, I was really happy to find out about her, and I actually found out about her a lot later through my friend Tanya, who does soap alternative in Brazil.
Hmm.
She's the first person, I've heard even talk about her. And I'm like, wow, how come I didn't know about her before? And then meeting
Right.
Scott, really cool guy. And just I look at a lot of that, even Nirvana. We could talk about all these bands that were sort of post punk or what people were calling postmodern rock or alternative.
Hmm.
The term grunge, I remember hearing that maybe about like 91 maybe or
Hmm.
92, and it was almost like a new, how could I say it? Like a new spin on that, like kind of how grindcore was for hardcore, a plate of that caliber. But the guy that actually named that was from that scene. That's Mick Harris from Napalm Death. But like
Oh,
yeah, I think the
okay.
industry probably named that just for record sales, and it's a regional thing. It seemed like like
Yeah.
because yeah, none of those bands sound the same. I love Mudhoney, Mudhoney and Nirvana. Out of the ones that I knew about, were probably my two favorites because
Hmm.
that's more of what I'm into versus Pearl Jam and Soundgarden. I'm not saying that they
Hmm.
were bad, but I'm
People have
but I'm
their
sorry, I moved
preferences.
you on a bit.
Nah, you're good. Nah,
Yeah,
you're good.
like I think when a lot of us talk about innovations like Death or Tina, because a lot of us from in general, a lot of black artists are not really showcased like a lot of the white ones have been,
Right.
even when it comes to obscurity. So especially being a part of this stuff, listening to this stuff, a lot of us brothers and sisters will rally under that. It's like, wait a minute, she was an earlier innovator of that.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that she was the first, but she definitely was an earlier innovator along with those other
Yeah.
people that you mentioned. And so, like, we kind of ride on that. And I think that's probably, but I do understand what you're saying big time
Yeah.
because, I mean, there's
It, it,
history
it,
and everything.
it's not to dismiss her place in it at all. Absolutely not. She's as important as what people are meaning to say when they say that. I just think that, the context is what makes things important. Uh, because Sister Rosetta Tharpe, she added electric guitar and blues guitar to gospel.
Yep.
Uh, does that make her the first rock and roll artist? I would say yes, but
Yeah.
the genre charts would say no. Because I think like historically the first rock song, and again, like genres are all made up. It's stuff that they made up to be able to sell and market things. The first rock record to ever be released in a chart is like an Ike Turner song.
Rocket
which
88.
yeah, 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 and it's I would love to talk less about the first and more just to talk about the context of what makes people important, you know? Because, at a certain point, words start to lose the meaning because it becomes like this sort of like meme. It's this short, neat sentence. And I know you know more than anybody doing series about the history of blackness in rock and roll. History can't be told neatly. Documentaries are always going to leave people important things out, and it's always going to be difficult to tell everybody's story completely and do them justice. Um, and that's why I really place importance on that, like at least just like getting it right first, because then when you lead into a world like that, that's when people start saying like, oh, the Willow Smith's the alternative black girl that we've always wanted, and it's like there's a scene of people over in the corner of a club that people, you know, just like warn people to stay away from, the weirdos, quote unquote, who are full of that person that they're saying that they want, you know? Um, the Breathing Light is this band here in Chicago, and like Kyle's got some fucking insane ideas. And I mean that as as complimentarily as possible, as a creative, as a poet, as a writer, as a drummer, everything. Because also Kyle's um someone please correct me if I'm wrong. Kyle drums on all of the studio recordings for the Breathing Light. Um, there may be some where like PJ drums here and there. And again, I wasn't there, so take that for what you will. But and he went to an HBCU and he was on the drum line.
Wow.
So imagine joining your first band, and this is what's like made this so like crazy to me, and I've like been taking it slowly because again, only just played my first live show like 2 months ago,
Hmm.
and it's in this band that is so fucking important, not just to us, but just also the Chicago punk scene in general, and the Breathing Light, very unsung. It feels like, and I love to see people get their just desserts. I love to see I love to see Soul Glow blow up.
Those guys killed. I love
I
that band
love,
live.
yeah, yeah. I saw them live with Third Face. Third Face just put out a new record. That album fucking
Man.
rips. I love to see Third Face blow up. I love to see all these people who've been out here grinding, and it's like Third Face is like, oh, it's their second record, but also they've been around for a minute. Soul Glow, Diaspora Problems is like what, their fourth record?
Man, I don't even know, bro. I just I've seen them live though, and they kill. Like, and I've seen videos, but I need to get their albums more. But I've been
Hmm.
to their shows, and I'm like, wow, I saw them with Zulu.
Hmm.
Shouts to Destiny and all those cats, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shout out to everybody who's been grinding. Like it's a tough and sort of like thankless. It's a glass half full, half empty thing where you could be out here for forever and be true to yourself and believe in your vision, and it takes 14 years for an idea to pick up, but you stuck with it.
But that's
um
also not to interrupt, that also is the thing even with Death. Like Death,
Hmm.
to be honest, like what they were doing, and I don't have a problem with people saying that they were amongst the first of even black pre-punk
Uh-huh.
bands, even though bands like Pure Hell were actually in that mix.
Yeah.
Death was, if they had that, and even was it Wayne Kramer? Wayne Kramer said if we knew that they were in the next town, we would have had them.
Yeah.
Those guys were doing it for so long and they grinded even on something that became a whole different thing than probably what they even knew about later on. And
Yeah.
ironically, the kids were into that kind of stuff and they tripped out when they found out that their dad played stuff that became what they were into, before it was even a name in that sense, or
And
or a big thing.
and correct me if I'm
So
wrong, but a big part of the story about Death is that like they recorded those two albums, but they were like obscenely obscure.
yeah, they were very obscure, unfortunately. Although, funny thing, I have a friend of mine from that area, Native American cat, that actually did see them,
Mhm.
like back in the day. And I'm like, wow. He's
Whoa,
like, yeah, I
that
saw them. Like, but it was like a rare thing. And then they became a gospel heavy rock band called was the fourth. How can I forget the fourth movement? Yeah, and that was still, I mean, especially for, I mean, there are heavy Christian rock bands. There have been
mhm,
since like the late '60s and early '70s, but that was one of those bands that is like, whoa, like they're
mhm,
playing that heavy. Them and the Res Band are probably the only two that I could think of. But
right.
like, yeah, I think when you're talking about Willow Smith, a lot of people don't know. And I think it's one of the reasons that I do what I do, to also give people to tell their side of the story. Like I've been honored to have like a lot of luminaries of a lot of these different rock movements on this. And it's so cool just to hear where they're coming from. People like Eugene Robinson or Hadley Morell or Dave Branscombe and Militia Vox, Joel, Jay Goodwin, all these different cats. There's so many to name, but that's the
Oh,
reason that
shout
I
out to
do
Jay.
these things. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
homie.
yeah,
That's the homie, man. I got stories with Jay. That's like that dude's a trip. That brother
yeah,
does stuff with Tape Six and then has a death metal band.
yeah.
He's a
And
trip.
is a devout Christian.
Yeah, he is.
It's
I am too, believe it or not. I'm
yeah,
Orthodox Christian. Crazy.
yeah.
But yeah.
Like
And he's real
like
cool. He's not on some weird, yeah, that's a whole nother story. And we talk
the,
about stuff that we don't like with certain things that people do in the name of our faith, which is silly. But that's a
yeah,
whole nother thing,
yeah.
you
And
know.
and it's like breaking bounds, being like unique, true to yourself, and like, but also like pretty low key about it as well. Like it's just like I don't know, man. It's like I don't know where I'm going with this honestly, but like like I live for like finding out about stuff like that. Like what you're doing right here is what I wanted to do with Metal for Brains, uh, and like the shit's real cool.
Man, well,
Like
thank you. It's
yeah,
people like you and Metal for Brains that were is just a part of what we're doing. For me, I feel like I'm one of many different, and for me, like I feel like people like you, the homegirl, Sam Hollins, who does black, I
shout
mean rock,
out to her.
Rock the
Yeah.
Diaspora, and Nikki, who does Rock the Diaspora. Calvin Chaos, enough respect to him too. You guys are all important. I wish I knew about Metal for Brains, man. And I
Hmm.
think I'm glad that you're talking about it because people need to know about this. There's a girl from Chicago that was a part of the earlier punk scene out there that had a zine, and I wanted to cover her. I can't find her now. She got off Instagram. That stuff is important to me because people need to know that we've been active in this stuff.
Yeah.
It's
That
not
was
like we ever
like
left.
when when the big accusations on Afropunk started, when like the normies, for lack of a better term, because I don't like
Nah,
being
you
that
already have
guy,
to explain.
but
I use the word normie and social. So yeah, we're on
but
the
when it
same page.
became finally popular to recognize the issue with Afropunk, uh, it was. around that time where me for metal for doing metal for brains, I was like, well, we've talked about why we don't like that for forever. And so I'm like, why don't I push the idea or push the attention onto something else? And we did our response to it was just to do an episode interviewing someone from this local crew who, again, I don't know if they still do shows, but they were Black, Brown, and Indigenous crew, and I think they did his theme. They might be who you're talking about. And I did an interview with someone who was running their show because they did a Black and Brown punk show in Chicago, and there was I had health problems around that time, so I was like, I can't go, but I want to bring attention to this.
Mm.
And you know, that was like my theoretic, like my conceptual response to people finally understanding the issues with black or with Afropunk, where it was like, I'm gonna bring attention to this punk band who posts their financial splits publicly at the request of nobody. You know, like, you know, stuff like that, ideals like that. In punk communities, like, again, like as someone who's like always liked a lot of stuff that like historically was maybe seen as something that clashed with punk. Like I
Mm.
always like I love Steely Dan.
Oh, you and me
Uh,
both.
and and I also love the Dead Kennedys, and
Yeah.
I love I love the Circle Jerks and Minor Threat and uh, you know, DOA, and uh, it's the punk is such a respectable thing, and it's so much closer to jazz than they think. And you know, especially like with the Dead Kennedys, you know, they had two drummers, and their first drummer was a jazz drummer,
Yeah.
and then their second drummer, uh, God, for I'm
Darren
terrible with
Pavia.
names.
Darren
Yeah,
Pavia. Rest in
and
peace. Love that
rest in
dude.
peace. Yeah, and it was like they were like one of the few bands who had two different drummers, of which no one argues about who's the better than
Yeah. Two
the other one.
different styles and
I
amazing.
I I'm a fan of Queens of the Stone Age. Their fans annoy the shit out of me because they can't stop talking about, oh my God, I miss Joey. Oh my God, John's not Dave Grohl, or John or Dave Grohl, or John is better than all of them, or and it's like, can't we appreciate like the differences and everything without like comparing it to each other? Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and punk is one of those things where it's like people. I mean, there's also people who will look at Black Flag and be like, Rollins era sucks, you know, that
That's
sort of thing.
silly.
But
That's just real silly. And
I feel
I
like
like,
that attitude towards the music is different.
yeah, that's
It's
silly.
less common. Yeah.
Yeah, I dig. It's funny you mentioned that too, because I dig, the stuff before Rollins, but Rollins is that's the first stuff that I ever heard with Black Flag, and I still like it. Like him and the stuff before, like just man, very innovative band. Um, I had another thing, kind of piggybacking off what we're talking about.
Hmm.
Um, Something that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, as far as like just the truth about blacks playing rock and roll and how it's regarded by black people as a whole. And you mentioned how like you mentioned something about Jimi Hendrix and how he was not regarded as much as he is now by a lot of us. If you don't mind, I kind of understood what you were saying,
Uh-huh.
even though like my father and my mom were fans, but there were people, and I've read things too, like some
Yeah.
people were saying that, that was white people's music or whatever,
Yeah.
the way he was playing. Judge Joe Brown even tried, it was kind of like, even though he kind of low-key was dissing Hendrix, but for me, I look at it as still an extension of what we've all been doing. And my dad, who was also a musician too, rest in peace, I mean, he saw Hendrix, and I didn't have that stigma growing up because I grew up with black folks that were into that stuff already,
Hmm.
even though I got into more extreme, heavier stuff. But like, I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying.
So yeah, like my dad, my dad was the group in the group of black folks who, when the cookout was happening, they were smoking weed in the basement, listening to Funkadelic. You know, it's like, the group of uncles who, are kind of like, you know, they're not always around and they're just shooting the shit loud as possible, maybe playing dice, but it's in, in the basement away from the crowd. They're playing Earth, Wind, and Fire outside, and they're playing Funkadelic inside, and it's like that era of history is crazy to me. And Donut Yourself, yeah. I mean, Jimi Hendrix, yeah. Like it is punk in the sense of like he's very true to himself, and but like he also did respond to people. Like he after he put out Are You Experienced, he got a lot of letters saying like you sold out, and like the history of him is like, he was a rhythm guitarist for the Isley Brothers uh and Little Richard, so he was already in rock music.
Yeah,
Although
he
by
was.
although by the time by the time Are You Experience came out, the Isley Brothers did pivot more into R&B, but and they always kept the rock edge
Yeah,
around them.
they
But
always kept that
yeah,
rocket.
yeah,
And my dad
and
always emphasized that.
yeah.
I had to add that. My dad, because he always showed me, even with the Ohio players and especially Funkadelic, maggot brain. Like, yeah,
Oh,
he was like, yeah,
my
these guys still played rock and roll.
my dad hates the Ohio players, and I can't
Wow.
understand it. I don't understand it. I try to. He's a weird guy. In a lot of the same ways, I'm a weird guy. It's just different perspectives on things. But like, so like, yeah, Jimi Hendrix. After he put out Are You Experienced, he got a lot of letters saying like he sold out playing white man's music. And on Axis Bold as Love, there's funk songs, and he's Little Miss Lover, which is very like black exploitation
But
soundtrack
it's
type
still
music,
heavy. That song
and
is
and
still heavy.
it's still heavy, and also like, have you ever been to Electric Ladyland on the third album? And a lot of Band of Gypsies was, back to the roots, and he responded to it while still being true to himself and being like, I hear you, and that's also shit I dig. Let me show you my version of that. And I always respected that because he never said it in an interview.
Yeah.
He responded in how he wrote as a creative. Jimi Hendrix was an amazingly underrated lyricist, underrated song arrangement guy. Like people talk about like guitar go Burr, and yeah, he made crazy sounds, but he was an amazing writer too. And uh, also, like with Funkadelic, I think it's funny because people don't recognize that Parliament and Funkadelic are different
Two different
bands.
bands. Yep. Yeah,
and
no, they are.
but like also it's the same people, but also it's the same people making different genres. And I always thought it was funny that Funkadelic was the band that didn't play funk music.
They were a rock and roll band.
They
As
were
a
the
matter of
rock
fact,
band, yeah.
a lot of people don't know this. Their earlier shows was not only with Vanilla Fudge, but also they played a lot of shows at the MC5 and the Stooges.
Yeah.
They were definitely like on, and then they specifically, especially Eddie and Tiki, were really into like a lot of psychedelic rock. They didn't want to wear. I mean, George was like, these guys wanted to be raggedy as hell. They didn't want to dress up.
Mhm.
They hated wearing suits. And so we just said, forget it, man. Like we're just gonna form this rock and roll band.
So okay. D- uh Donut Yourself, and if you know what their name is, feel free
Yeah, I
to
know
let me know.
Donut. That's one of my
Okay.
sound army cadres. What's up, brother?
Yeah.
How are you, man?
They
Donut's a
they
sick
a-
drummer too.
they asked the I should check them out then. But yeah, they say what artist had the first punk attitude, and so that I get weary of like labeling it as punk, um, because it's really just like the idea of aggressively sticking to your guns. So it's like, who's the first to do that? Well, who's the first person to get shunned into oblivion? You know,
It's funny.
it's like uh, Miles Davis definitely had that, and a lot of that was cocaine fueled. No shaming. But uh, when people talk about like punk as a concept, I think of punk is more community based, but it's music based community. And when people think of punk attitude, it's this attitude that comes from the community, which is of just like being yourself aggressively. Um, and so like that's a question that like probably doesn't even have an answer because it's like Sister Rosetta Tharpe. She
I,
sang she sang gospel, playing blues guitar, and she sang about fucking making women come like with her tongue, like you know, like that's a level of sticking to your guns that like it would be considered like very quote unquote punk rock, but it's an idea that like it's hard to apply to in the past because you're taking a concept that has this new name to it and adding it to a way that creatives have approached their art and themselves as creatives since the invention of creativity, since drum lines in Africa, you know?
heavy man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say there's a lot of artists to name. I got a list. I mean, yeah, Miles is one of them. Bo Diddley's another one. Gory, I forgot the homeboy's. I think his name was Robert Gory. There's a bunch of too many to name. I mean, Charlie Parker, Sun
Yeah.
Ra, freaking
Sun Ra, fuck, yeah.
you know, who's the jazz artist that wore the mohawk? How could I forget his name? Um, there's a lot. There's a lot,
I
man. I mean,
mean,
seriously,
Sly Stone.
man. Yeah, Sly.
Sly and the Family Stone made rock music. Like
Yeah.
that's a thing that I like. That's the part of rock history that I want like to point out too. As much as I'm not personally a fan of Prince, and we don't need to get into why. But Prince made rock music.
Mm-hmm.
Stevie Wonder made rock music. Uh, you know, how can you listen to Living for the City
Yeah, I love that
and
song.
not say that's not a rock song? That's a prog rock song.
It is a prog rock song, and let me tell you this: you should talk to Jay. I did an interview with Jay. Jay did something, and how could I forget the song that he compared it to? Man, Jay, if you're on here, ask Jay about his comparison to Living for the City. I think he did it with a Metallica song. They had the same melody. I was like, what the
Mm,
heck? And that's one of my favorite songs. But I was like, dude, when he played it, like, I'm like, what? I never thought about that.
yeah.
Yeah. And then
Uh,
that's totally bad, man.
I I I fucking suck at drums right now. And look, I'm hard on myself. I know that I'm pretty solid. Especially for someone who's only really been playing like for 2 years. Because shit, I haven't even gotten to my story about like how 3 months into actually taking drums seriously, I tore my left patellar tendon and
Ooh.
took 2.5 years to get it fixed. So I was you know, I'm learning for limb independence for the first time in my life just now. And but like, living for the city is so fun to play because also that part you just sang the melody to. Da, da, da,
It's
da, da,
feelings.
da, 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 da. Like that bit, it's so fun to like start playing, like throwing in like double bass, like hurdas into it, and like, what's his name who does the I fucking I'm so sad. I'm so sorry that I do this with names.
No,
Um,
I forgot some
Eh,
names too.
but like the guy who does the TikTok stuff about like when the gospel director, music director hires a metal drummer, like that
Oh, I've
yes,
seen that, but I don't know who did it. That stuff is comedy, man.
that living for the city is so fun to like throw that in, especially into those bridge sections,
Yeah.
um especially at the very end. Which, I've tried to record that song so many different times, and I posted a version of it, but I cut it off in the middle because I was
Don't
very
you
unhappy
said
with how it turned out.
you said his name was Big Brother? What, my name is Big Brother? That's his name? No? I, I don't know. But
Uh,
nah, dude, like
yeah.
that guy kills, man, on the drums. Was that Stevie on the drums in the original recording? Because I see the live, and I forget the brother that played with him. He's played with a lot of people too. Um, the brother with the big natural that's just going
So
nuts.
I know that Stevie played the drums on Superstition. Um, I don't know if he played. He might have played on Living for the City. He might have played on that. Is that no? Is
He's a
that on
sick
the same
drummer too.
album?
I think Intervisions. Yeah, I think so.
No, I
Man,
think
now I'm drawing
is
memory blanks.
isn't
Shame on
Superstition on
you.
Hotter Than July? No, God, yeah, I can't remember. But that Sir Duke, Sir Duke's lyrics make me sad actually,
Man.
because people have forgot Satchmo, people
Yep.
have forgotten about Ella. Um, my name is Big Brother, the Stevie Wonder song. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Um. Oh, dude, man. So, where are you from? Like
Oh, me?
regionally? Yeah.
Long Beach, California. Yep.
Long Beach. Okay. So here in Chicago, um, especially when I was coming up or growing up, when I got my GED and I was taking the red line, Jackson, and the blue line to uh, Illinois Medical District, which that'll mean something to someone out there, to get the Malcolm X, to take the classes I was taking to, eventually take my GED test. I was always, hanging out with the the musicians who were playing uh, at the train stops.
Huh.
There's a guitarist I know. His name is Rodney Johnson. And he was always playing. He played a really amazing solo version of Little Wing, and there'd be times where like they would all trade off between shifts where they would all collaborate with each other, and sometimes they'd have a drummer, and uh, uh, they would play Stevie Wonder songs. They played "Knocks Me Off My Feet," and man, no, talking about Stevie Wonder. See, like it's weird. I didn't grow up with Stevie Wonder playing in the house. My mom wasn't. My mom is white, obviously. Hopefully not obviously in my approach to blackness. I would like
Well, I
to
mean,
think
I
I've
got
avoided.
relatives that look like you, so I didn't know.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to assume that I have avoided white mom syndrome as it's become a
It's
meme.
comedy.
But my mom was always into the Beatles, and like Journey and stuff like that. And my dad was into what he was into. My grandma was into, Chuck Berry and Little Richard and James Brown. Stevie Wonder was never playing growing up, but like I have that nostalgia for that era where the street musicians we're playing, Stevie Wonder songs while I was waiting for the train to come by, and I would like end up coming home hours later than I normally would, and my dad would be like, "Hey, did anything happen?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I was just hanging out with the street musicians."
That's awesome. I'm gonna give a few shout outs. We got the what is that? Cosmic Blue Beauty and the legendary Rhoda Dakars in the house from the
Yeah,
Body Snatchers.
yeah,
Shouts to both of you guys. That's so
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, man.
So
Thank you
so
guys for dropping in on us. Really
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cosmic Blue Audie, like autistic. Yeah.
Oh, my bad.
Uh,
Sorry
yeah.
about
No.
that. I
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
my glasses
Yeah, no, no, it's all good. You see me, I got my specs on. But yeah, no,
on.
yeah, shout out to them. They're the homie for forever. And again, like I've lived in I was born in Peoria, and I've lived in Chicago since I was 3.
Wow.
And Chicago just has this history to it. And I'm trying to get more information out of my dad out of it because again, I told you my dad was in this band. They played a bunch of different genres. I don't know if they had a name. I might ask them. Please send me the name of that band that you mentioned earlier. But he has the story. There's this neighborhood on the south side of Chicago called Bridgeport, which is historically racist. Um,
Wow.
and Chicago is segregated. And so they hear South Side and they immediately think black. But
Mm.
that's just south of downtown. That's where the White Sox play. And that was also where the mayor's family lived for like 40, 50 years. And so
Wow.
my dad
Say
has
it
the
again,
story
Mayor
where,
Daley?
yeah, both Mayor Daley's, they both lived in Bridgeport.
Crazy.
And my dad has this story where he was booked as playing country at a bar in Bridgeport. And when they showed up and they were all black, the owner told them they can't play. And they were like, we came from 115th and Halsted all the way to 35th Street. You're paying us, or you're going to have to close shop for the night.
I heard that.
And, after all that, they agreed to pay them. And then, they started unloading the drum kit because they had the nerve to do that after and only after they, got the drum kit loaded in, which is like a crazy amount of equipment.
Yeah.
And and my dad tells the story. He says, right as they got it all back in the van, he was like, man, I gotta use the bathroom. Turns around, tries to walk in there. They locked the door on him. And my dad just like was like fuck it, and then just like took a leak right on their front door. And you know if you think
That's
about the
fucked up.
idea, yeah, exactly, I was just about to say, of being aggressively yourself. He also has stories about like being jumped by like skinheads and stuff out there, and trying to get it reported by the Chicago Tribune, and them being like, yeah, that's the mayor's side of the city. We can't talk about that.
Yeah, no,
You
I
know,
hear you. And I'll be honest, from what I know about Chicago and people that I know from there, even older than me that were Panthers, I'm not too happy about Mr. Daly, if you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah,
yeah.
not too happy about it.
My dad wanted to be a Panther, but they told him he was too young, which I find funny because Fred Hampton, started when he was like 14,
Yep.
15.
And
Um,
I know other younger Panthers that were in different chapters that started around even yeah, around that age too.
mhm.
Very close to me. So that's funny that maybe they were looking out for him. They probably was just reading, maybe they were just wondering. I mean, I can't say anything, but yeah, very,
They
very.
they they like they were like, you can't join, but if you want to hand out these flyers, go ahead. So that's what my dad did for them when he was like 13, 14.
Wow, man. Very, very. I don't care what no media says about that group. They did a lot for the community. They were not villains. They were not terrorists or anything like that. And people always, I had to, I found out just from people that I know close to me before I had to be indoctrinated by the school about them. And just hearing their stories, and even the particular person that I'm talking about from Chicago who knew Fred Hampton,
Hmm.
just really just man, they did a lot, man. They did so much, and the media dogged them out.
Yeah,
The COINTELPRO dogged them out. So
yeah,
yeah.
and it's. I mean, that's also why they allowed or they not just allowed, they kind of manufactured the crack epidemic. Um, because even though like the GDs, the Stones, Vice Lords, all that, they started as like with the same mission statement as the Panthers, as you would know, with the Bloods and the Crips, and uh, I I'm sure there's other gangs in South Central, California. Um, but that's not my lane. But like, in Chicago, the GD Stones, Four Corner Hustlers, Latin Kings, so many gangs, but they started out with like the same mission statement as the Panthers. They were self-policing their neighborhood, and it's like literal, like actual court documentation from people who were in the Reagan administration talking about allowing crack cocaine to enter the black neighborhoods, so that because they knew what the Italian mob did against each other with rival families over drugs and ownership of like turf. So they were like, let's do this to them. And so yeah, it runs so deep.
Yeah.
Uh, free Hoover, free Ford.
Speaking
Uh,
of that,
yeah.
oh, sorry about that. Speaking of that, no, I'm hearing you on that, and yeah,
Mhm.
that's yeah, that can go, yeah, we can go on and on about that, and I have a
Yes.
feeling that we both know exactly what we're
Yeah.
talking about,
Yeah.
so I understand where you're coming from, but in piggybacking on that, something that I know you're probably gonna get a kick out of this, and I don't want to like piss you off.
No, piss me
What's the
off,
deal?
but no.
What's the deal with freaking like Haley Williams crip walking? Really? Are you serious,
Oh,
dude? And is she really biracial? Like, wait. Okay, first of all,
okay.
let's
Okay.
talk about
Okay.
that. Because out here
Okay.
where I'm from, in my city, you can't just do that. You
This
can't
is
just do that.
so
It's not just a
this is
dance. I don't even do it.
okay, so this is my Roman Empire here. Okay. For this is the mountain I've made. When I die, either cremate me and throw me into the sewage, or bury me on this mountain I've made, which is about Haley Williams. So to give context, okay,
Yeah, I'm
like 2 years
sorry,
ago,
you guys. He's gonna give you the context of what I'm talking about,
yeah.
and I
So
have some
like,
questions about that.
yeah, because again, like this is something that I've like watched, and I'm like, am I the only person seeing this? It's so fucking weird. But okay, like, it's been like Paramore is popular among, black people who were in high school, who were like more like blurred adjacent type stuff, or who were into alternative music, at the time, and that's fine, completely fine. Paramore's cool. Their first couple records are nice. I don't listen to them just because they don't scratch my itch, but their drummer has always been fucking fantastic. Um, but this is where problems start. So, Haley Williams did that solo album, and it's very like SZA influenced, and it's very it you know she had the the black choir and everything on some stuff, and so the black fans were like, oh, okay, she's embracing us. And then Paramore started the tour like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and then she's like authentically, I would say, kind of like doing a little like booty pop and twerking or whatever. Not like Megan the Stallion style, but and she'll like do like a little crip walk here and there,
Yeah,
and and and
that's what I was
so
like, no.
okay. Here's the thing. Okay, hold on. Let me finish the story
I'm sorry.
before I get into that, because I learned something about that this year, and this is why it's like regional culture is so important. But so, and again, she's from a part of Tennessee that is like 0.8% black.
Hmm.
It's very upper middle class. And the context of her, like she was signed to the record label when she was a teenager. The band was never signed. They got the band for her because she wanted to be in a rock band, and it ended up being a good rock band, so good for her. But also, some would say that qualifies her as an industry plant. Um, and
Wow.
but like people will use that and her black influences to her vocals, which is obvious. It's there. I recognize that. But then her black fans will turn around and be like, yes, my biracial queen, when she does the little like booty pop or the crip walk stuff. And I was always responding to it like, what the fuck? And then like one of my pinned one of my pinned things on TikTok, which my TikTok is Corey, which is I spell it Coreh, talks at you, which is kind of kind of kind of a commentary on both how I have conversations and then also how TikTok functions as a platform. But it it's me responding to this queer black guy saying that Paramore is the blackest band of all time.
Did you put block,
And
or did he say that?
he said that. He said that. I I moved. I have that post on my Instagram too. I'll try to
Yeah,
find it for you.
that's
He's
what made me ask
he's
that question.
yeah. He says that while wearing this like yellow do-rag, and it feels so interesting. Interesting. Let's use the word interesting. Okay, so let's try to ruffle as few feathers as possible. But okay, and so I respond just exasperated, being like, "Here's Living Color. Here's Oceans of Slumber.
Yep.
Here's here's uh I've never Mafa Maafa. Shout out to
Ma'afa.
them. Maafa. Okay, I've never said it out loud, so but they're the
That's
homies.
to them.
Uh, yeah, and
Flora
I'm
and all
like,
them.
yeah, Flora. Flora is the one that made me feel like, oh yeah, okay, I can openly talk about jazz fusion here.
Awesome. Yeah,
Because
she's amazing.
she's a jazz girly too.
Man.
But then like, and my response is just in the action of here's black bands, because again, my issue with that and the Willow Smith stuff has always been like there's black bands and we get to be we're kind of really unsung, like, and it's nice to mention that she is influenced by black culture. My favorite metal band is Opeth. Opeth is very influenced by jazz.
Oh yeah.
And their rhythm section was Uruguayan for their prime years.
I didn't know that.
Martin Mendez and Martin Lopez. uh, from My Arms, Your Hearse all the way up to Ghost Reveries. That was their rhythm section, and they were both Uruguayan, Swedish.
Huh.
So, so both of their parents are Latino from Uruguay, and they both were. I think they both were born in Uruguay and moved to Sweden,
Huh.
and so that's where a lot of the Latin rhythms comes from. And then like Mikhail is who's the leader for the band. He's always been into jazz, and so a lot of their stuff is using jazz chords and jazz modes and blues stuff. But like he's always been like himself, and he's not like you know he's not gonna come on stage wearing a do-rag. In fact, he wears a fedora. So it's
Right.
like it's such like a cultural disconnect from me, even though like we're in the same culture, and I'm like, this is I don't think that would be my natural reaction to that.
I have to ask,
Um,
is Haley
yeah,
Williams biracial? I've
no,
only seen
no,
her live once, but
no,
yeah, I was like, I
hell,
didn't think
hell
so.
no, no. She's white. She's as white as my mom. My mom is
Funny.
my mom was half German, half English and Gyp and uh see it's weird. People talk about like gypsy as if like it is inherently a slur, but
I
they
always use Roma
self-identify as such.
because I've always heard like some of the Gypsy cat or Roma people that I
Yeah.
met, they
Uh-huh.
say that they don't like that.
So
So,
it's a person-to-person thing.
yeah.
Uh, and so that side of the family, they were fine with it. But they were Roma, and also in England, the the Romani people don't have an issue with this word at all.
Huh.
So that's a very cultural thing too. Talking about regional stuff, but back and speaking of the regional stuff, talking about the Crip Walk, I did not learn until the fucking Kendrick Lamar shit that that there were Crip walks and blood walks, and the differences
Yes.
between them is that they're spelling the names of their neighborhood with their feet,
And
which
crossing them out. Not only that,
yeah,
it depends on what Crip said and what Blood said. So
yeah,
it goes deep. I don't mess
yeah,
with it. That's
yeah.
something, and I know people in that culture. I just, it's just
That's
not. I
that
mean, you grow up around
that
people.
is also hoodoo, for what it's worth, which is one of my practices. I would say I'm more spiritual, agnostic, but I have my beliefs.
No, I hear you. So you're saying hoodoo is like Crip walking? I'm just curious.
Well, like the practice of like spelling out a name with your feet and crossing it out
Oh,
for
I hear
someone that
you.
for someone that you have disdain for. That's like
Oh, I didn't think
that's
about that. No,
that's
I
very
get
like
exactly what you're saying. Wow.
that's like hitting someone's feet when sweeping.
I never thought of
Yeah.
that. Man, I never thought about
That
that.
that
So
is
it
like
goes beyond.
very, very ancestral African stuff.
Wow, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
If you're into hoodoo, like we could probably talk about herbs and stuff. Because I mean, I'm not saying I'm a practitioner of that, but
Hmm.
I'm into herbalism, and I know people that are into that. They know their herbs and stuff. So
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
crazy. I never thought about that.
Hey, we learning
Wow,
over here. Yeah.
dude, I never thought about that until you said that.
Yeah, yeah,
But
no.
yeah,
It was like the first time it had it explained to me was during the pop out stuff, which I have my own feelings on Kendrick Lamar, but I have more passionate feelings against Drake, so I was on his side for that. And I was pretty invested in the
the
commentary
beef.
about that whole thing. And but like someone mentioned that they were doing Crip walks and blood walks, and they were spelling out the names of their own neighborhoods and not crossing them out.
Yeah,
Um,
sometimes it's a tribute, and sometimes it's a diss. It
and
depends.
and
Me,
so it was like
yeah,
Crips and Bloods doing it to tribute their neighborhoods, and
yeah.
it was not coming from a place of hate or whatever.
Well, it depends on what it is and who it is and where you are and why it's done and how it's done. Because
Hmm.
it could be either or. Like seriously. And then of course, if you're familiar with Tommy the Clown, there was the clown walk. He was one of the guys that kind of made crumping, but
Yeah,
or clown dancing. But he was
yeah.
kind of like trying to get people out of the gang. So he had his own walk. But
You
that's
know
still
what's
not a
funny?
part of the Crip and Blood
So
thing.
you know what's funny is like, okay, so I dropped out of high school in freshman year.
Wow.
And this sounds like I'm going off on, or I'm just saying something completely unrelated. I'm gonna get there. But
It's
like,
all
so
good.
yeah, I dropped out in freshman year because I moved to Peoria and I went to Peoria Central for a year, of which if you're a basketball fan, Sean Livingston, who was the backup point guard for Steph Curry, and he was the starting point guard for the Clippers for some time. He went to that high school. Can't remember if Richard Pryor went to. I think he grew up in Peoria, but by the time he was in high school, he wasn't living there anymore. But like, so I lived in Peoria. I went to one semester. There was some stuff with my parents. I was supposed to go to Hyde Park Career Academy. And I came back. Hyde Park wouldn't take me back. And my only school that would take me was my community high school, which was Harlan. Of which, if that means anything to you as a viewer, I'm sorry. And that is also the reason why it was two reasons. One reason was, I'm not about that life. I don't want to get my ass kicked every day.
I heard
Uh,
that.
but also I know what I am. I'm never going to learn my lesson. I'm going to talk shit until the day I die. So you go into gang territory, school, gang central. It's a recipe for disaster. And that was also during a time in Chicago where they were closing schools in rival gang neighborhoods and forcing people who lived in neighborhoods from rival gang territories to go to schools with each other, like getting rid of each neighborhood having a school. And that was like a huge spike in violence in high school.
Why would they do?
Yeah.
I kind of don't get it. I'm
Mhm.
sorry. That's strange.
Uh, because Mayor Daley is an asshole, and this was also around the time Oprah made the school in South Africa, and I'm related to Stedman, by the way.
Oh,
And
for real?
yeah, um, my grandma on the black half of my family, she's half black, half native, but the black half is they're the Davis family from East St. Louis and Detroit. So I went to a family reunion once, and he was there. And then
That's a trip,
that's the
man.
yeah
You're like, wait, what?
yeah. But so I dropped out because my grandma had dementia, and so I would take the night shift. My mom would take the morning shift, and uh, so my time online was spent on a music piracy forum, and it was also spent on the forum for the YouTube parody people who did like the Juggernaut Bitch and Dennis Frogman, which are classics. If you remember 2005, 2006 YouTube,
Was that that
the
they
power
took the
they
comic book character Jaggernaut?
yeah, yeah, it was like, oh yeah, it's the Juggernaut bitch, and I got a bitch with me. Yeah.
I seen a few
Ain't you seen
of
my
those. I'm like, what they do?
ain't you seen
So
my
random.
movies? Jug, nuh-uh, you can't fit it in there. Um
That's crazy, man.
and, and then they're from Chicago. There were a bunch of Puerto Rican and black dudes
Oh Lord.
from Humboldt Park. Um, and Dennis Rodman was a Power Rangers parody where one of the enemies was called Dennis Rodman, and he would like, "Oh yeah, you can't hit me because a nigga gangsta," like
Crazy.
that whole thing.
Man.
It's hilarious. But like the other side was the music piracy forum. Is a bunch of Mexicans from Oakland. So like I know a lot about Oakland culture. I know about Fizz Face. I know about Mac Dre. I know about all that shit. But
Yeah.
outside of that, like I don't know much about California.
Yeah, Oakland is totally different from Cali, man. And I'll say like, yeah, they both, yeah, it's two different kind of ways that they kind of run on from. And I'm not in that life, so I don't have nothing to say. But that's one thing I do know, just based off of some people that told me certain things, and yeah, crazy stuff though, man. That's I tried to stay away from that stuff as much as possible. But you grow up around people that are into that stuff, and then like you just kind of hear stuff. It's just a part of like what you know. But it's kind of cool to some degree because you don't want to like get caught up or mistakenly disrespect anybody either.
hmm
But man, I always think all the northern cats, like Northern Cali cats, are way more mellower than we are. They they're, and I'm not saying hippies and like they cats could be just like messed with, but they're
hmm
just more laid back. But don't put it past them. I mean, people. It's funny. People thought MC Hammer was all like soft, and no,
No, he was
no.
about that life. No,
Yeah, he was a northern
I
cat. He was
I
from
I used
Oakland.
to I used to date a black woman from Sacramento. So yeah, they were definitely the more chill, but they also had that side that you could bring out in them. It
Yep.
was,
Plus, they got that
but
Panther energy too. Like, man, I
yeah,
always think of like the Hustlers, Guapole, or freaking hippies and Panthers every time I think of the North. Like
Guapo, Closer is one of my fucking Mount Rushmore of R&B albums.
wow.
Uh, uh, man, that is. Uh, I think sh she's kind of like
Shit,
on the Santa Gold. She's kind of on the Santa Gold wave. She's just out here. She's still doing it.
so
Uh,
funny. Tiny Goat's
yeah,
awesome too.
yeah. Shout out to Santi. And God, what was the name of her punk band? Uh,
Stiffed, right?
so yeah,
Wasn't it
Stiff.
Stiff?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah. So like, I, I was in that life for 2 days. I was the GD for 2 days. I
Are
had
you
pe- I had I had people who looked out for me.
okay? I was like, if
I
it's yeah, I don't know how to
I
bleep this out, but
no 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 no. It's no fucking problem.
okay,
And again and oh no, I'm wearing red. Ugh, whatever. That's not a thing anymore. Also, like no one's gonna. I did get jumped for wearing. I'm a Falcons fan for sports and football, and I got jumped for wearing a Mike Vick jersey because it had red on it.
man,
Oh, there's a whole story there. My mom got me that jersey the Christmas before he got arrested for dogfighting. Um,
that's insane. Are you serious?
yeah, no, I was actually just about to say inviting me on anyone's show is dangerous because I have stories that'll have you here for like 4 hours.
Wow.
But yeah, no, the, I was like in that life for like 2 days, and I had people who was looking out for me, and so they let me like act like it for like a day, and they were like, "Yo, just so you know, we gonna have to test you, and I just want to ask you." Do you want that, or do you want to go home to play Metal Gear Solid? That's basically how that question went.
At least see
And I
the
was like,
police gave you the ultimatum.
Yeah, and I was
That's
like,
the Lord's will, from what
yeah,
I understand.
it was people who was looking out for me, and a lot of that was also like I have a half brother who earned a lot of respect in my neighborhood because he just mollywopped the shit out of this one dude who was like kind of seen as like the neighborhood tank, to use video game terms. You know, in video games they refer to characters who's like they hit hard and they have a huge health bar. You know, he's a
Man,
tank. He beat the shit out of him publicly
that's insane.
in the middle of the basketball court, and they were like, okay, we're not gonna mess with Justin. It's the name of my brother, and my social security number is three. No, I'm
Nah, I
kidding,
don't.
but no. But no,
Keep going, man.
but like that, I guess he, him and I had this conversation, and he was like, that's the reason why no one messaged you. You know that, right? And I was like, you know what? I did talk a lot of shit and only get my ass kicked once. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Cats be looking out, man. You know,
Yeah,
yeah, cats, and cats will look out for you. I know that for sure.
yeah,
And if they care, if they know you're not about that life, they'll just make sure other people know that you're not, and just to kind of look out for you, which is cool. People
yeah,
don't never hear that side of the out of it, but yeah, I know that. But
yeah.
man,
Like you mentioned the stuff about like crossing it out, and I talked about like how the relation of that with hoodoo. That's kind of similar to the Chicago gang culture and like throwing up the rakes or throwing it down. It's just like
wow,
spiritual energy, negative energy, you know? It's more than just like the sentiment of disrespect on some level, you know? But,
man, I
yeah.
didn't even think about, like, literally. I don't know how I missed that. Like, I didn't think about that until you said that. I'm like, I never thought about that. That's a trip. And
Mm.
yeah, man, that's wow. But like,
I love a lot of like African spiritual history, African history in general, the like African history of gender as a construct and how it existed differently before the slave trade, about how culturally or spiritually and also like a lot of that's led me to like Haiti. Uh, there's a Haitian music artist. His name is Azor. He makes a lot of like percussive dance songs.
huh?
And I found out about him through John Theodore because John Theodore, he's a he's biracial. He's half black, from Baltimore. Shout out to Baltimore. And you know, and again, that's the drummer for the Mars Volta and currently the drummer for Queens of the Stone Age. And his black half is Haitian.
Huh?
And he talked a lot about his Haitian influences, and that led me to a lot of like different Haitian rhythmic, drum line rhythmic stuff. Which then, led me to just the other side of the world type, even though the Caribbean's not that far away, but like I'm just talking about like as a whole, the diaspora
Yeah.
of the Brother Moves On in Joburg, South Africa. God, I would love to play a show with them. They're so good. Have
Shoot.
you heard of them?
What are they called again?
The Brother Moves On.
No.
I have a video to show you of they're an African jazz band. And they do have a lot of cultural stuff. They do have a lot of jazz numbers, and they have a guitarist. And they make use of them, and they go hard. They do a lot of there's this one piece. Uh, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like they're playing this jazz number and then they're collaborating with a spoken word artist, and it's one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever heard.
Huh.
And it's all about the spoken word piece is all about how masculinity gets passed down from generations and what happens when they create this construct to pull people away from their fathers, um, let it be from the slave trade or from the modern slave trade of you know, the you know, prison industrial complex.
Yes. Sad.
And again, it's one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever heard. And it's like a really deep spoken word piece, but also everybody's just having the time of their life. It is like the musician's dream, and that's why I'm ultimately here. Like, I played my first show with the Breathing Light a month and a half ago, and um, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but and it was like that moment in between songs where people were reacting and I was able to finally stop focusing on the mistakes I was making or the ideas that I was having for the next fill or the frustrations I was having with, oh, I used the wrong sticks for this song, my hands cramping, that whole stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know if you've had that experience in the middle of a song where all you're thinking of is like what you're not doing and it's like frustrating you, and then the song ends and then everybody's fucking cheering. Like it's like some of the stuff that's like I've only ever been on the other side of this type of reaction, and those are some of the coolest nights of my life.
That's all.
um that's that's a musician's dream. I never I this may sound sad to say, but I feel happy saying it. I never felt happiness until I felt that.
Wow.
Um, and I mean that optimistically because now I get a chance to do that more often with Kyle and hopefully with other people.
I'll say this, man. Being a musician myself and a music teacher and all that as well, and just it's just a release that just even when you make a mistake, you're still going through. I tell my students, and someone told me this too when I was a kid. If you make a mistake, man, just make it again. Basically, what he was saying is play through it. And I kind of like am influenced like a lot about even before I, started reading about the Desert Fathers, you know, um, of Ethiopia and Egypt and all those places and um, those early African Christians. I had this concept, but it was just even more. It just kind of really came into fruition. Even thinking about what they were doing, like praying through all kinds of stuff, even when they were going through and being attacked in that regard. I feel the same way about playing.
Hmm.
Even if you make a mistake, you play anyway, and just that release is still there. The energy, man, is just like there, man, and it's
Hmm.
just like I'm glad you felt that. And the crowd, they don't know, and even if they did, oh well, you're still rocking madness no matter what. You're
Hmm.
still, dude, you're still that's your freaking like voice, man, and even if you mess up, man, you can't get that back. We're going forward. And I'm
Right.
glad that you're playing, man. Like, that's so cool. I'm glad that you felt that way. And just that love was just embracing you, man. Like, just your own creativity embracing you, letting you know it's still cool no matter what kind of sticks or anything that you did.
Yeah.
That just, hey, let's forge on. I hope that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it
You know?
does. And like living life with like, all types of both diagnosed and undiagnosed and uh, all other types of things that just are doesn't need to be diagnosed. Uh, it's one of those things that like it's one of it's one of the instant answers for a moment of anxiety that I've never felt before.
Mm.
Um, the worry of like, oh, did I fuck up that conversation? That person hates me for the rest of my life. It's like kind of like that moment in the middle of making a mistake on a live show, but then like the immediate response of the crowd just being really fucking into it. It's really weird how I connect that sort of stuff, but like, and I hope I explained that well.
Nah,
Because
you did. You're good.
a- as a
You
creative,
totally did.
I can explain things in a bit of like obtuse metaphorical type of way. And I don't know how long you want this to go. I'm down for as long as you want, but I'm very curious because you asked me if there was anything I didn't want to talk about,
Yeah,
and
I
that
just
that
for
had me like,
me,
uh-oh,
I
what did you find in your research?
well the thing is I try to be respectful and I
Uh-huh.
don't want to like I'm one of those people. I'm very analytical myself and I'm very sensitive about like I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings in
Hmm.
that regard. Or if I'm stepping on anyone's toes, asking any personal questions. So I always ask that before I interview anybody.
Hmm.
And you give me the okay to do it, then that I'm cool. And then there's some people that will say, no, I don't want to discuss this, and I'm like, that's fine, thank you. That
Yeah.
way, I could navigate better. I don't want to make any mistakes.
Mhm.
But even with this interview, I've thought that some of the things that you're thinking too, man. I wish I could have asked this or I could have responded this way. But you know what? We're flowing, and that's the whole point. And for me, it's all about navigation in life, no matter where we are. Which, of course, a lot of us it's an arcane path, and we're all still figuring it out. I
Hmm.
believe that the Most High set everything before us. I can't figure it out how and in the great scheme of things, but I can only do what I can in the present.
Right.
And music even help me with that too, especially improvising stuff where we don't know where each other are going. We're listening to each other, and some of the most amazing things come out. Sometimes it's not something that we might not dig, but then there's sometimes it's just like, whoa, it's kind of like life. And I'm glad that you experienced that. It may, whatever, what you're talking about, diagnosed and undiagnosed, may all that, be healed or there's a word that I'm looking for, resolve,
Hmm.
soon, especially like when you're playing. I'm glad that you have that space of freedom in that sense. Keep that. That's
And,
the
and
cool thing.
and Kyle's been really amazing to work with, because again, as a drummer, he he understands. So it's been really cool to be able to like find my place in the sound that's like so defined, like the breathing